Hey and welcome to Neverwinter with Aragon. So here I'd like to cover my Fighter Dreadnought build for Module 29. This will be something to work towards to maximize your stats while including most of the good damage bonuses. This is accompanied by a build document where you can see everything that you need to put together this entire build, including what powers and feats to use with a bit of descriptions and rotations there, and then group optimization when you join an endgame party and they can give you different bonuses. Link in the video description for that, but ultimately you'll walk away with 90% in all of your offensive stats and the good damage bonuses at over 105,000 item level. This is about near the max you can get while capping your stats and using the good damage bonuses, again, like companions. Keep in mind it's a solo damage build, so it's not dependent on anything a team can give you, meaning it's excellent for when with just random players. It's designed to be a solid baseline, which you can then tweak depending on specific content you intend to play. But be aware of the group bonuses, particularly in endgame content. These bonuses can be used to increase your damage further by switching some things around. Check again that optimization section for details, and I'll cover it more visually in this video towards the end. And keep in mind there's plenty of alternative gear and items you can use to achieve similar results. You don't always have to spend a fortune to get exactly what I have. Again, there'll be timestamps on the play bar below. You can skip to any section you're most interested in. So for now, we're gonna jump to how to actually play, what powers you want to have set up to actually use. We'll start with multi-target. So I do recommend having two separate loadouts. We'll switch to our AoE one here, Area of Effect, multi-target, and this is what I would recommend. You can see that here in the document as well, but there's a few slight variations you can have. For example, ricochet plus shield throw can be very good when there are just a few enemies. As soon as you have 5 or more, you're better off with, say, tremor and prepared slam, just because it can hit an awful lot more enemies. On top of that, you can get away with not using always spiteful and manage your vengeance on your own a bit better, and then potentially have greater endurance to get a bit of extra movement speed. But ultimately, you'll enter combat, immediately get that 50 vengeance. You can use your shield slam there, then your tremor, then your onslaught, and everything should be dead. And otherwise, you'll use a heavy slash on like one tanky enemy if they're left, or reeve if there's multiple of them, and you can get the hits between them to actually hit multiple of them. As you can see, it's a bit of a line attack just there. Again, just make sure you're always above that 50 vengeance. If you ever drop below it, make sure you're taking advantage of your features and abilities to bump that up again. You can use your Seath, you can take advantage of Bloody Reprise, and if you're popping in and out of combat, then always Spiteful. Again, you'll usually start off with your Shield Slam, then do like your Tremor, and then your Onslaught. With regards to your daily power, Earth Shaker, make sure your vengeance is above 50. You'll cast that, and then you'll gain the benefit of Shockwave. You'll cast that, that'll consume your vengeance, and then make sure you're casting Encounter Power after that to get the vengeance back with your Bloody Reprise. And that's pretty much it. Then we go to single target. So you'll want to use this power setup. You can see the selection of abilities here again in the document. But again, there's a few slight variations you can get away with. For example, using Griffin's Wrath instead of, say, Commander's Strike, particularly if you have somebody else in your team who will also have this physical vulnerability effect. Rogue has it with, say, Wicked Reminder if they're playing on Assassin. And then, of course, other fighters. Additionally, if you're playing solo and it's hard to flank your targets, using Trip Attack combined with Knee Breaker can be invaluable because of the granting combat advantage effect, giving yourself combat advantage against the target, and on top of that, all your allies. Massive in fights like Tiamat or against a tortoise in Fanbreaker Island, where it's impossible to get combat advantage against your target unless you're using, say, a companion like the Black Death Scorpion to do that. Now, you will want to have a particular rotation with this set of powers, And the most important part will be the artifact call. This is a time when everybody uses their artifact. You just cast it and you want to all have different ones that increase the target's damage taken. You can see a list of the different ones here. And so you'll do like 3 to 4 times your normal amount of damage. And so it becomes crucial to use the correct powers in the correct rotation for that 10 seconds to maximize it. And it does heavily depend on the Mount Insignia bonus Tactician's Precision. Ideally, you want 2 of them, plus an Artificer's Enticement. You can then see here exactly what rotation, what order you want to use your abilities, and you need to squeeze all of that into 10 seconds. You can see that as an example here. Heavy Slash, Commander Strike, Artifact, Anvil, Bull Charge, mow down, your belt item, your mount power, you can heavy slash, and then commanders, bull charge, and anvil. And that's your 10 seconds artifact call. You pretty much got to use your encounter powers twice within your daily power and mount power. That is what I found is the best way to optimize it when you have, say, 2 tacticians and an artificer. You can see the other variants there when you only have, say, 2 tacticians without an artificer, when you have only 1 tacticians, and when you have no tacticians. So it will be something you'll want to work towards. Now, once you finish that artifact call, you just need to make sure you maintain your vengeance above 50, and otherwise just using your heavy slash and your encounter powers when they go off cooldown pretty much. Just try and use, say, commanders before you use anvil, and that's like the best way to optimize so that anvil gets the extra damage boost. And as you approach the next artifact call, just make sure you save onto those encounters and be ready for that, as you will go straight back into that rotation again. And yeah, that's pretty much Fighter. Very hard hitting, but a bit clunkier to play, and you are all melee focused. Another thing I want to touch on with regards to how to play is animation cancelling. You can gain a bit of extra damage by doing this. You will find yourself automatically doing it if you play long enough. You'll basically just use your block or your seath to cut the end animations of powers to immediately cast a different one. You can do that with heavy slash here. So rather than letting the full animation play like this, you're just like pressing dig in, and that way you can cast it quicker again after having cancelled the end animation of the ability. You can do the same with block. It's just a lot harder to do it with block without, say, ending up doing your, say, guarded strikes or your shield bash. Also, your daily power is very valuable to cancel that animation. Like normally it's a 1.5 second cast, but you can press block like pretty immediately after having cast it and then gain all the damage from it. Just make sure you're not doing that too fast, or you might not even trigger Tactician's Precision. You can see that here with the example, when we do co-cast mow down, you immediately cancel it by blocking, and then you're straight into casting like your belt item and mount power. Now, with regards to heavy slash, you can use this keybind right there in order to make it a little bit easier. You'll like copy that and you'll put that in your chat. And then when you just like tap your at will power and you repeatedly tap it, it will automatically animation cancel, like going into the seath very shortly and allowing you to then immediately cast it again. But you do need to get the timing on that, because if you go too quickly, like you spam it too quickly, you just won't do any damage. You can, of course, do this manually just by, say, holding down your at will and then pressing seath. You can get some slight cast time reduction on your encounter powers as well. It just, yeah, requires timing and then also practice, and make sure you're actually hitting with your encounter powers and not, say, cancelling the damage. There's a bit of a knack to it, bit of a learning curve, but again, you will automatically find yourself doing this if you play long enough. I know I do it on Paladin, but that, I believe, is ultimately how to play in single target. And we'll now move to our race and ability scores. For this build, what I found fit best is half orc, just for the 5% crit severity. You do get some bonus movement speed with that, and the ability scores are pretty favorable with dexterity and strength. That's what you want to choose. As you level up, you'll also want to go with strength and dexterity. Now we go to our gear. And again, this is the setup I found works the best to get as much item level as possible, along with these all damage stats maxed out and the good damage bonuses like certain companions and some gear. You can see in the document exactly where all of this gear is coming from. Just be aware of things you might want to switch out. So if you're not in fire themed maps, you'll want to switch those boots, because they're kind of useless outside of fire themed maps, to something else that would give you damage. As per the document, there's like the sharp long boots from the Drang's Flair campaign, the rusted iron leggings from Valanast mini bosses, or other zone specific boots like the ones for Wild Space. And your shirt as well, the damage bonus is kind of pointless outside of fire themed maps, so you can simply go with the Ember infused one instead, giving you extra cooldown reduction. And going into like multi-target fights, you might want to switch your headpiece, which currently only gives you combat advantage when you're in a longer fight, over to like the Dark Maidens ones to give you extra action point gain when you kill enemies. Alternatively, there's like damage bonus in Vault of Stars or Undermountain, things like that. Also, the arms, you'll want to switch them over to the Depth Forged Gauntlets, as currently the Ultraviolet ones will give you critical strike when against one enemies, whereas the Depth Forged ones will give you critical strike when against multiple enemies. But that is ultimately all of the gear right there, exactly where it's all coming from. Again, it's something to work towards. There's lots of alternatives you can use, especially if you're working up. Just make sure you get ones that give you bonuses to these stats. You can see like with Mountain of Flame, there's also legendary gear from the new dungeon, which pretty much has the same like bonuses on the head, the boots, and the arms. It's just the armor piece is different, and so you could get the armor piece from Dragon Hunts instead, which is the Mighty Kuras. But from here we go to the modifications. You can see we're just running power in all of these slots with our armor, and then we're running combat advantage in the neck, rings, and the waist. You can see that in the document just here as well. Then we jump to our enchantments and artifacts, and you can see this is what we're using. You want to have like a garnet, a jade, 2 citrine, all garnets in defense. Otherwise, you can just have spare ones there. It doesn't really matter. A garnet in utility, then Rage of Flames and a Devil's Precision. You can switch the Rage of Flames to other damage specific bonuses like against dragons, against undead, demons, things like that, depending on the content you're running. A lightning flash here, recharge speed here. You can get a movement speed one when you're in multi-target to actually get to the enemies faster than, say, your teammates. And then the artifacts, we have these. Just be aware again, your primary artifact, you want to have one that is going to increase the target's damage taken by everybody. You all have to use a different one, so make sure you have a bit of a selection to be able to use to fit into a group properly. But these are the ones we use as secondary, highest item level ones in the game, plus this one for extra stats, which is also account wide for alternate characters. But you can use alternatives, you'll just need to adjust your stats a little bit. You can see exactly where each of those artifacts are coming from if you want to copy exactly what I have. Just don't overpay for anything. Then we go to our boons. For the campaigns, you want to put your points into all of these offensive stats here in these columns. You want to get the movement speed. You want to get your forte, your action points, your recharge speed, your bloodlust, life lessons, blessed advantage, and make sure to get like damage against specific types of enemies depending on the content you're running. You can get blessed resilience, and then you can go for like lingering medicine, and then you can go like all the hit points and all the defensive stat ones. For the guild stronghold, we're going with crit strike here, defense, and then a revived sickness if you're running content where you might die. Now we jump to our companions. So your striker companion, just make sure you're using a decent one. For single target, you'll want one that's good there. For multi-target, you'll want one that's good there. But ultimately, you can get away with just anything you have at hand. But you can see my companion document. They're all like ranked here for single target, for multi-target. And then if you just want one that's going to give team support, there's all of these ones. They can be particularly valuable in endgame groups. The companion gear, just from the Mountain of Flame, we've got 3 pieces of this. We've got then the Potency, the Stalldorf, the Bateri, Minsk, the Neverwinter Knight, and the Golden Cap. That just gives us all the stats we need for this build. Now, if you do go into multi-target content, I would highly recommend switching the Bateri over to like the Spine Devil. It'll give you an extra bit of damage at a chance. And then you can potentially even switch Minsk over to like the phase spider for a bit more front loaded stats. Then we go to our mounts, and in our current tab you want to have a single target mount for those boss fights and a multi-target mount for groups of enemies. I do recommend Big B's hand here because it's physical. The other ones that are good are just magical. And then for multi-target, I do recommend like the Space Guppy or the Pegasus because they have high target caps and do decent damage with the Space Guppy grouping up enemies. You can see that just there with Schools in Session. It's basically a vortex which also dazes enemies. Then we have Dominant Force here, but I would recommend having at hand Ferocity for a little bit of extra damage in group content. Then we go to our stable. We can see we've got 2 Tacticians, an Enchanter's Hex, Warlord's Motivation, and an Artificer's Enticement. That's what I found to be the best, and you can see all of the insignias. Most of them are Brutality just there, with then a skill, aggression, a skill, a skill. You can see the total of them here. Now again, the mounts to give you these exact bonuses, there are quite a few different ones, so go ahead and check my mount document for that. For the collars themselves, what is important is the encounter power damage and the critical severity. You can see the other ones we use here as well, but it's not a big deal. Then we go to our consumables. On this build, we're using our Ratatouille from our guild, our Squash Soup event food, Flask of Potencies from crafting, Wildstorm gift elixirs from invoking, and then with our belt items, we just have a Stone of Health for the more tougher content, the Owlbear figurine for the single target fights, and a Forger's box. For multi-target fights, I do recommend, say, the Dragonfire or the Wondrous Doohickey or God's Own Doohickey, which is a mythic one we'll be getting with the next Gond event. And then the Empowered Forger's box, you can switch over to say a Bell of Empowerment for companion damage if again you have group bonuses. So our last section is group optimization. When you join an endgame group, you can find them granting you these different benefits. You want to make the most of them. So for example, Pack Tactics, you can switch some companion gears that don't give combat advantage and then make use of it. Otherwise, you can switch some jewels to awareness, giving you some more survivability. With the Mystic and Runic Aura, you can switch Dominant Force over to Ferocity. With Portobello, Flapjack, Tutor, you can switch like your Golden Cat or your Staldorf over to one that would give you power. And that way you can just switch your potency over to like a team support one, armor break, vulnerability, dulled senses, or you could switch like your helmet over to an alternative one. That's just, again, in your companion's equip page here, switching out the potency to a team support effect and then this over to like power, because again you'll be getting that combat advantage through those companion bonuses. Then with the Paladin Crit Aura, you could potentially switch your arms so that you don't have to worry about am I in multi-target or single target, and just go over to like the healing mitts, just flat out 3%, plus the Paladin Crit Aura will max you out. You just lose a bit of item level though, which can be worth it depending on the content. And then finally the Tamed Raptor gives you a massive boost in power there, and you can make the most of that by then being able to switch off, say, potency here, you won't need that. Or if you had switched this to like armor break and switched this to like power, you'd switch just the Raptor here, and then you switch this to like acute senses. Or if you have the companion bonuses as previously mentioned, you won't need that, and so you could be like armor break there, Tamed Raptor here, and then you can also switch this ring which gives you power over to like a damage bonus one, so like the Sapphire Abyssal Loop ring, or there's lots of other ones against specific enemies, like against dragons, beholders, undead, beasts, constructs, etc. And yes, of course, you can switch your Forger's box over to like a Bell of Empowerment to boost your companion's damage. And that would make the most of all of these different bonuses. It will depend on the group, how many of them you're using, if you're using all of them or not. And thus, again, you can improve your damage. Again, also with the weapons, there will be some content where some weapons might be better than others. Celerum right now will fit nearly everywhere, but there's say the Void Touched ones which can be a little bit better when you know you're against just one enemy, a bit more item level, a bit more damage buff. And then there's even like Mirage weapons which can be useful in some content, particularly if you're not that adept at playing the class yet. But again, that is the entirety of this build. I hope it helps. Keep in mind the goal of the build is just to create a solid baseline that you can tweak depending on the content. This is more of a general build to get you maxed out stats, to get you good damage bonuses, and from there it's up to you to optimize to fit into whatever group you're going with. You will find Fighter probably the easiest class to cap your stats, just because the sheer amount you gain through these general features. So once again, thanks for watching. A special thank you to all of these channel members, and we'll see you guys around. Goodbye for now.